What if I told you that the hour you wake up might be the reason you're stuck? Not your job, not your stress, not your past, just the simple fact that you open your eyes too late. Because there's a version of you, a stronger, clearer, more disciplined version, waiting at 4 a.m. And once you meet that version of yourself, you don't go back. Let's talk about why waking up at 4 a.m. every day won't just change your schedule, it will change your identity. Number 1. 4 a.m. forces discipline before motivation ever arrives. Waking up at 4 a.m. is not an act of inspiration. It's an act of self-confrontation. It's you choosing discipline long before you feel ready, long before your mind has warmed up, and long before motivation even exists. At 4 a.m., nothing feels comfortable. Your bed feels heavier, your body feels slower, your mind feels foggy and resistant. And that's precisely why the decision to rise becomes a psychological weapon. You're not moving because you feel energized or excited. You're moving because you've trained yourself to take action independent of emotion. This is the moment where discipline is forged. In the cold, quiet hour where no one else is awake to applaud you, where no one is watching, and where every fiber of comfort is begging you to stay in bed. The world is still asleep, and you could be too. But you choose otherwise, and that choice is what separates growth from stagnation. Most people wait for motivation. They wait for the right moment, the sudden spark, the boost of energy that feels good enough to push them forward. But 4 a.m. doesn't give you that luxury. It strips away the illusion that you need to feel ready to begin. The act of getting up becomes a discipline-first practice, a commitment that exists even when your emotions disagree. At 4 a.m., you learn that readiness is a myth. You learn that energy is created through action, not the other way around. You see, when you wake up early, motivation is nowhere in sight. It's discipline that carries you through those first difficult minutes, those first steps into the world, those first decisions that set the tone for the day. And in those decisions, you begin to realize that discipline is not something you acquire, it's something you practice until it becomes the foundation of your identity. When you rise at 4 a.m., you create a deliberate separation between who you've been and who you are becoming. You detach from the version of yourself that operates on convenience, comfort, or mood. You stop relying on unstable bursts of motivation because you no longer need them. You understand that if you wait until you feel like it, you will never reach the life you want. Early mornings force you to build an internal architecture where action stands on its own, independent of mood swings, fatigue, or excuses. This is where emotional resilience begins. This is where mental toughness becomes real instead of theoretical. You are training your brain to act with clarity even when it feels resistance, and that training spills into every part of your life. What you discover is that motivation actually follows discipline. It arrives later, sometimes much later, but it arrives because you've earned it through the consistency of your actions. It's in the quiet hours of the morning, when the world is still and your mind is uncluttered, that you begin to feel the first sparks of self-respect. You realize that discipline isn't about punishment. It's about building trust with yourself. It's about proving, day after day, that you are someone who follows through, someone who chooses long-term growth over short-term comfort, someone who doesn't wait for the perfect mood to shape their life. And that lesson, learned at 4 a.m. in the darkness before dawn, becomes the foundation for everything else you do. Number 2, quiet hours create mental clarity most people never experience. Quiet hours create a kind of mental clarity that most people never experience because these hours strip life down to its essentials. At 4 a.m., the world is silent in a way that feels almost unnatural. There are no conversations happening, no traffic echoing through the streets, no notifications vibrating through your phone, no competing demands pulling at your attention. You wake into a kind of stillness that feels like stepping outside of time itself. This absence of noise isn't just peaceful, it's psychologically transformative. Your mind, usually overstimulated and scattered, finally has room to breathe. Thoughts organize themselves without force. Ideas rise to the surface without interruption. The mental fog that lingers throughout the day begins to lift because nothing is competing with you. The quiet becomes a kind of internal mirror, revealing what you actually think, what you genuinely want, and what you've been avoiding under layers of daily noise. This kind of clarity doesn't happen during normal waking hours because you're constantly surrounded by stimulation. Even when you're alone in the afternoon, the world is awake. People are moving, working, talking, texting, posting, reacting, needing something, wanting something. Your mind stays on guard, anticipating the next demand. But at 4 a.m., that pressure evaporates. There is no external world asking you to respond. You can finally hear your thoughts without distortion. You can process emotions without being pulled in 10 different directions. You can think deeply instead of reactively. Most people never access this depth because they never access this level of stillness. They wake up into noise, move through noise, and fall asleep to noise. Their thoughts stay surface level because their environment keeps them on the surface. But quiet hours push you inward. They create a space where you can think in full sentences instead of fragmented impulses. In this silence, your priorities become sharper, more honest. The things you've been procrastinating suddenly appear with clarity, not as overwhelming tasks, but as manageable steps. The dreams you've buried under daily responsibilities resurface in a way that feels grounded and attainable. You begin to understand what matters and what doesn't, what deserves your energy and what drains it. Without the constant flood of external input, you can finally separate your own voice from the world's expectations. This is where real self-awareness forms, not in the chaos of the day, but in the silence before it. And once you taste that awareness, it becomes addictive. You start craving that clarity because you realize how clouded your mind has been for years without you even noticing. Quiet hours also create emotional clarity. When the world isn't pressing in on you, you can feel your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. You can observe them rather than drown in them. You start to understand what you're carrying: stress, frustration, fear, ambition, hope, and you understand it from a place of calm rather than urgency. This emotional distance allows you to respond instead of react. It gives you the psychological space to regulate your thoughts and feelings before the day begins. And this matters more than people realize, because the quality of your morning shapes the quality of your decisions, your reactions, your productivity, and ultimately, your entire life. The quiet hours create a mental environment most people will never experience simply because they never give themselves the opportunity to step away from the noise long enough to access it. Number 3, you gain control before the world starts demanding things from you. You gain control before the world starts demanding things from you, and this control becomes the foundation of a completely different kind of life. When you wake up at 4 a.m., you enter the day on your terms, not the world's. Most people wake up and are instantly thrown into a current of responsibilities, messages to reply to, deadlines to meet, people to answer, problems to solve. They open their eyes and immediately start reacting. But waking up early flips the dynamic entirely. Instead of being pulled into the world's noise, you step into a space where nothing and no one needs anything from you. There is no pressure, no demands, no conversations, no urgency. The day has not yet begun for anyone else, which means you get to begin it from a place of strength rather than survival. This shift from reactiveness to intentionality is subtle but powerful. It reclaims your time, your focus, and your mental stability before anything external has a chance to interfere. During these early hours, you are not fighting against the clock or against responsibilities piled on top of each other. You are not rushing through your morning trying to catch up. Instead, you move at a deliberate pace. You choose what to prioritize. You choose what matters. You choose how you want your day to feel. This sense of control creates a psychological anchor, a groundedness that carries into the rest of your day. Because once you've taken ownership over your morning, the rest of the world feels less overwhelming. Stress hits differently. Challenges feel more manageable. You don't feel behind before you even begin. You've already built momentum while everyone else is still asleep, and that momentum becomes a protective layer against chaos and unpredictability. This is where the power lies. You are not reacting to the world. The world is reacting to the version of you who is already centered, focused, and prepared. When you gain control early, you also strengthen the relationship you have with yourself. You show yourself that your priorities matter. You show yourself that your goals deserve time and space outside the rush of daily life. Most people push their dreams to the end of the day, after work, after stress, after exhaustion, and then wonder why they never make progress. But waking up early reverses this pattern. You put yourself first, before anything else has the chance to drain your energy. You give your mind clarity and your body movement before the world starts asking for pieces of you. That act alone builds self-respect. It builds trust. It builds identity. When you start your morning in control, you start your life in control, and that consistency compounds into something bigger than a routine. It becomes a quiet declaration of authority over your own existence. This early control also protects your mental bandwidth. By the time most people wake up, they're already overwhelmed by information, notifications, reminders, tasks, conversations, responsibilities. Their focus becomes fragmented before they even start working. But when you wake up at 4 a.m., your mind gets uninterrupted space. You can organize your thoughts without noise. You can make decisions without pressure. You can structure your day with clarity instead of panic. And because you've already established direction, the rest of the day feels less chaotic. You're not being pulled into every urgency that pops up. You're navigating from a place of internal order, which is something most people never experience because they wake up already behind. Early mornings give you the rare opportunity to claim your life before anyone else touches it. Number 4, you build unstoppable momentum before sunrise. You build unstoppable momentum before sunrise because the actions you take in the earliest hours of the morning compound in a way that feels almost disproportionate to their size. At 4 a.m., you start your day with a head start the rest of the world never sees. While everyone else is still sleeping, you're already moving, thinking, creating, and aligning yourself with who you want to become. Momentum isn't something that appears out of nowhere. It's something you generate through action, and early action carries a different weight. There is a psychological power in doing things before the world wakes up. It gives you a sense of accomplishment, control, and direction long before anyone else has even begun their day. You're not chasing the clock, you're leading it, you're not catching up, you're already ahead. Your morning becomes a private sanctuary where progress feels clean, focused, and undisturbed. And that purity of effort builds a confidence that multiplies throughout the day. During these early hours, you aren't interrupted, distracted, or derailed. There are no incoming calls, no emails demanding attention, no emergencies pulling you off track. You get to operate with a level of consistency and smoothness that is rare during daytime hours. This uninterrupted flow allows you to get into deep work faster and stay in it longer. When you accomplish something early, whether it's a workout, journaling, planning, reading, meditating, or tackling a project, your mind registers it as a victory. And victories create a chain reaction. They raise your energy, strengthen your discipline, and shift your internal state from passive to powerful. Instead of starting the day in a rush, you begin with clarity and achievement, which completely changes how you approach tasks later. The small wins you stack before sunrise become psychological proof that you are capable, consistent, and committed. This early momentum doesn't just influence productivity. It transforms your identity. When you repeatedly do things that require effort before sunrise, you start to see yourself differently. You begin to view yourself as someone with control, discipline, and direction. You're no longer the person who reacts all day. You become the person who sets the tone. This shift in identity is massive because it shapes how you behave throughout the rest of the day. When you wake up early and achieve meaningful progress, you're far more likely to continue making purposeful choices. You're more intentional with your time. You're more resilient when challenges appear. You're more focused on what matters and less tempted by distractions or excuses. The early momentum carries you, supports you, and strengthens you in moments where most people lose steam. And because this momentum begins before sunrise, it compounds quietly and powerfully. People around you may not understand why you're calmer, more organized, or more confident, but it's because you've already done the work long before they open their eyes. You build a foundation that others never see, a foundation of discipline, clarity, and self-control that stabilizes everything that comes later. When the day finally begins for the world, you're already deep into your stride. You've created a sense of internal direction that makes you harder to shake, harder to distract, and harder to break. This is how momentum transforms you, not in loud, dramatic bursts, but in the quiet, consistent actions you take before the sun rises. Number 5, waking up early rewires your brain for stability and emotional strength. Waking up early rewires your brain for stability and emotional strength because it forces you into a rhythm that supports clarity, order, and psychological balance. When you consistently rise before the world wakes, you train your mind to operate from structure instead of chaos. Most people start their day already overwhelmed, waking up late, rushing through routines, skipping breakfast, reacting to messages, feeling behind before the day even begins. This puts their nervous system into a state of stress immediately, and once you start your day stressed, everything that follows feels heavier and harder. But waking up early does the opposite. It gives your brain a calm, predictable starting point. You begin the day with spaciousness instead of pressure, silence instead of noise, intentionality instead of urgency. This quiet routine sends a powerful signal to your brain. You are safe, you are in control, and there is no need to panic. Over time, this repeated signal becomes hardwired into your emotional baseline. Your brain craves patterns. It learns from repetition. When you wake up early every day, you create stability through consistency. You're not waking up at random times. You're not living in unpredictable cycles of exhaustion and rushing. You're giving your brain a steady anchor point, a rhythm it can rely on. This reliability strengthens your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and long-term thinking. When your mornings become predictable, your emotions become more manageable. You're no longer waking up in fight or flight mode. Instead, you wake up calm, clear, and grounded. This grounding effect changes how you process stress throughout the day. Instead of reacting impulsively or emotionally, you have enough internal space to pause, reflect, and respond with intention. Early rising becomes a form of mental training, shaping your mind to handle the world with more strength and less volatility. This stability also gives you emotional resilience. When you consistently wake up early, you build discipline, and discipline directly strengthens your emotional stamina. You learn how to push through discomfort. You learn how to act even when you don't feel like it. You learn that your emotions don't have the power to control your actions unless you let them. This builds a sense of inner strength that carries into every aspect of your life. When challenges arise, you're not immediately overwhelmed because you've already proven to yourself, morning after morning, that you can handle difficult things. The discipline of rising early becomes evidence that you're capable of more than your feelings suggest. This evidence creates confidence, and confidence creates emotional durability. On top of that, early mornings give your brain time to decompress before the world's stress accumulates. You can think clearly, breathe deeply, and reflect without interruption. You're not rushing into the day with a cluttered mind. You're stepping into it with mental order. This internal organization makes you more patient, more focused, and more emotionally steady. Because when your mind is clear, your emotions follow. Waking up early becomes more than a habit. It becomes a psychological framework that supports emotional strength, mental clarity, and long-term stability by giving your brain exactly what it needs: consistency, quiet, and control. Number 6, your identity shifts from reactive to intentional. Your identity shifts from reactive to intentional when you wake up early, because the decision to rise before the world places you in a position of authorship rather than passive participation. Most people go through their days responding to whatever happens around them. They wake up to alarms they snooze, messages they didn't expect, responsibilities they didn't plan, and emotions they don't manage. Their days unfold like a chain reaction, each moment dictated by something external. This reactive lifestyle shapes their identity in subtle ways. They start to see themselves as someone who is always catching up, always overwhelmed, always adjusting to circumstances instead of creating them. But when you wake up early, especially at a time when the rest of the world is silent, you interrupt this reactive cycle. Your morning becomes a conscious choice rather than a forced beginning. You're not waking up because you have to, you're waking up because you decided to. This decision alone begins shifting your identity into someone who acts purposefully instead of someone who merely responds. The quiet hours of early morning give you space to define your day before the world defines it for you. You think clearly without interruption. You decide what matters. You set your priorities. You create the emotional tone for the entire day before anything external has the power to influence it. This intentional setup is more than just a productivity habit. It's a psychological shift. You start seeing yourself as someone who has control, someone who moves with purpose, someone who does not need to wait for circumstances to be ideal before beginning. This becomes the foundation of an intentional identity. Identity isn't built through thoughts, it's built through repeated behavior. When you repeatedly choose to wake up early, even when it's uncomfortable, you reinforce the belief that you direct your life. You become a creator instead of a reactor. This influences how you approach goals, relationships, challenges, and decisions throughout the day because you've already experienced yourself as someone who leads rather than follows. Over time, this deeper identity shift affects your emotional patterns as well. Reactivity often comes from feeling out of control, feeling like life is happening to you rather than through you. When your mornings are chaotic, your emotions follow that chaos. When your mornings are rushed, your mind operates from pressure. But early mornings, intentionally chosen and consistently practiced, give you a sense of internal stability that reduces emotional turbulence. You begin to respond more calmly because you're grounded. You make decisions more thoughtfully because you're centered. You stop letting small irritations or unexpected problems derail your entire day because your self-image is no longer tied to instability. You see yourself as someone who shapes their environment, not someone shaped by it. This shift in identity also changes your long-term direction. When you become intentional, you start acting in alignment with your values instead of your moods. You pursue what you truly want, not what feels easy or comfortable in the moment. You become more disciplined, more patient, more focused, not because you force yourself to be, but because your identity has evolved into someone who behaves that way naturally. Waking up early becomes the anchor that reinforces this identity every single day. It reminds you that you are not defined by circumstances, emotions, or external demands. You are defined by the choices you make and the direction you set before the world even wakes up. Change doesn't happen in big, dramatic moments. It happens in the quiet choices you repeat every day. Waking up early is your chance to claim control before the world takes it from you. Meet the version of yourself that exists in those silent hours, and you'll discover strength, clarity, and discipline you didn't know you had. The morning isn't just a time, it's an identity shift waiting for you.